Hey everybody, it's good to be here. Welcome to the Maxon booth. My name's Andy Needham. I'm a freelance motion designer, senior motion designer, I guess, based in London, UK. And online you can find me pretty much everywhere with this handle. I'm called Andy, and I've worked on various projects for brands like Apple, Google, the band Coldplay, and the X Factor USA titles. And I have a mix of both technical and design skills. I guess I'm fairly all-round. I take projects from concept to completion. And what I like to do now is just share my motion reel with you. Let's take a look at what I'm going to talk about today. I'm talking about not only visualizing a brand with Cinema 4D, but also Cinema 4D's place in the production pipeline. And specifically, there's a product that's fairly recent, fairly new, called Meta. And so Meta is this content metadata platform that allows, imagine you have, you're a broadcaster and you have say all the data that goes into Game of Thrones, for example, all the imagery, all the data about the actors and all that kind of stuff. Questions are like, how do you store that, and also how do you distribute that? And Meta is a platform that allows you to do that. It has a really lovely UI, makes it all very clear and easy for people to do. So there's a few products here, and you can see a little bit about it right there. Now, my role and tasks are to create an animated logo, do a UI reveal, and also illustrate the product features. Now, I'm going to focus on the first two today. Let's take a look at the UI reveal. So earlier I mentioned production pipelines, and so I've got a couple of examples of here. Initially, getting those ideas out of my head onto a storyboard, cutting out those frames and putting them into Photoshop, and then assembling that as an edit in Final Cut, and then just quickly sharing it with the client via Slack. Another example being the logo animation. I'm provided with a spline, a 2D vector file, and I can bring that in Cinema 4D. Taking it from the 2D world, do something in 3D with it, and then bringing it back out into 2D to composite in After Effects, and finally deliver via Dropbox. So there's some very crude sketches, but you got to get them out quickly. And I find that making really rough thumbnail sketches is useful. You don't have to spend too much time on these at all, and then I can put those into the edit, as I said, and this gives me something to share with the client so that we're kind of thinking like we can get initial sign-off on some ideas. And this is a flexible piece, really, where I can add in a more fully formed ideas of how maybe the user interface would reveal. And not only that, it it's something that I can do to even take away ideas from, because you're putting in things that just may or may not work in the final edit. So at this stage, it's a very loose and flexible document. And so what I'd like to do is talk to you about this logo reveal to begin with. So we've got a couple of things going on. You can see how the lines are being drawn out, and then the logo is just sort of gradually being revealed, and this was all created in Cinema 4D. I've gone ahead and actually brought this into C4D, and all I've done so far is animate a camera, and all we're doing is just sort of framing up on this logo. So to do the logo reveal, I'm going to use MoGraph for that, and I'm going to bring the extrude object here, which is what I use to create geometry with the spline that was brought in from Illustrator. I'm going to bring that into essentially the MoGraph world. So this is the fracture object is part of the MoGraph system here, and by doing so, what I can do is use effectors to actually turn this on and off, and more crucially, a material, and using another part of MoGraph, which is the color shader in the alpha channel. So if I just apply this material now to the fracture object, you can see it disappears. Now, this is because the plane effector is a linear field, and if I just show you the linear field here, just unhide the visibility, it's currently over on the left. So it's going to pass through this and reveal the logo. Now the key setup to that is to make sure that your fracture object in the transform tab has the color set to black, and like I said, we've got this material in the color shader. Now the next thing, if we just come out of the camera and have a look at this, you can see as it fades in, we're getting something that potentially undesirable looking result here. Now to clean that up, it's very simple. We can come in and add one of the render tags now in R21. This is where they've all been nicely organized now, so if you can't find it, but we're looking for a compositing tag, and what we need to do is just turn off the seen by refraction. I think also seen by transparency may work as well, but for me, that's a much cleaner look and more something that I expect from maybe just doing this effect in After Effects or something like that. So from there, I can add to get the lines animating, we're going to add another MoGraph tool, MoSpline. Now what this will do is allow me to change the mode to spline mode, and I can just take that the same spline that I have, come over to the spline tab, and just drop it in. And you'll see that we have now the outlines there on the logo. So it's just a case of coming in and animating either the start or the end, so I can create a right-on effect. And also, if I wanted to, I could also just maybe set this down quite low and just adjust the offset. Now you can see when I go beyond a certain threshold that it's going to give me something that I don't really want. To fix that, I can just uncheck the extend, end, and start, and now I can create almost like a highlight effect on top of something that I'd also do. So let me just show you the two setups that we have here. So simply one to reveal and one to add a highlight, and to actually get this rendered in and something out of Cinema 4D, all I need is to just use the hair material, and so that allows me to just drop this on, and as long as I have the hair render effect in the render settings, then that will output just fine. So we can move on now, and I'll just show you the final look of that. So this is what we end up with, a little bit of comping in After Effects, but mostly just straight out of Cinema 4D. The next thing I'd like to talk about is a plugin that was very useful for this project called Top Performer, and it's by a developer called Merk Wilson, who produces very useful plugins in my opinion. So I can add this as a child of this cube. And if you're first learning Cinema 4D, the hierarchical structure is a the key thing to learning it, really. So once you get that certain objects need to be a child and other objects need to have children to actually do something, that's the key to learning it. So you can see this cube now will be affected by effectively this topology deformer. I can change the mode, and it seems to be thinking about it for a while. Let me just use the arrow keys, and I can step through a couple of these. My favorite, and the one I was using on this project, is the beeple mode. So why not? Which is great. And so I can adjust some of the parameters. If I increase the iterations, I'm going to add some more complexity. Another way of adding more complexity is just to increase the segments on my cube. So if I have them all selected, all I have to do is just manipulate one. Okay, Command and Enter will be, or Control on a PC, is the one that you want to use. So just having one and them all highlighted, make a change to a single one, and there you go. Now, so they have more complexity here. To add the detail, just come over to the Generate tab and create, and it's as simple as that. Now, what it does is it creates a MoExtrude, another MoGraph object actually, which you can find in the MoGraph menu, and a couple of effectors that are doing some things here. But all you need to do to control it is to come into the Generate tab and then adjust these settings here. So from there I can dial in the look and feel as I'd like it. Now, one thing that was very crucial for this is to produce some previews, because when animating in Cinema 4D, you can't necessarily trust the timeline because geometry can be very heavy. Certainly when you add all these effects on, if I were to turn on the top performer on these, then we would slow down the viewport, and it wouldn't give me a true 25%, well, in this case, 25 frames per second playback. It seems to be very good, but if I turn everything else on, that's not going to be very useful for me to actually see how, maybe the timing of this or a certain element. So what I can do is just turn these all on, and we'll see if I play back now, way slower. So for me, what I need to do is generate a preview that I can then take that storyboard edit and actually show the client something that's more fully formed, but we don't actually have to worry about all the textures and all that kind of stuff. So there's a couple of ways of doing this. We can switch ourselves, change our mode over to maybe hidden line or something like that if you want to get rid of all the materials, that if you've added something like that. This will give you pretty much a grayscale wireframe look. And there's other things that you can turn off. You can see here, as I scrub through, we've got this little axis here. Now I can just filter things like that off. That's the world axis. Maybe clean up my look of this. And there's other things that you can, of course, filter off as well. So to do that really simply, come over to your view settings, which is Shift-V on the keyboard, and then we can just toggle these on and off as we need. So what I'll do is leave it like that because I'm happy with it for now. And to make the preview, simply do this. It'll set me up with the hardware OpenGL, which is exactly what I want. And these settings, for me, are exactly what I need. So I'll just choose OK. And very quickly, it'll go away and think about it. And you can see the progress at the bottom. It's done already. Opens it up in the picture viewer. And now I have something that I can play back at the full frame rate, export out, and share in a rough edit. So it's very simply to save it. You can come over here, make sure you're in the animation mode, choose a file that will support that. You can save it as an image sequence if you like, but MP4 is just fine for me, and I'll just choose OK. Then I drop that into Final Cut and start to assemble more of a rough edit. As I'm designing shots, I can then, put them in. There's nothing really to focus on apart from the motion, and it gives me a clearer picture of timings and all that kind of stuff. So I can adjust this as needs be. So we're getting closer to something. It's not final. It's very, got to say that as well, just to avoid any confusion. And there you go. Now, so we're getting closer to where we need to be. And from there, of course, as you increase the complexity and start to, render low-res versions, you can start to bring in more of the final look and feel. All right. Next thing I'd like to talk about is one of those shots that you may have seen there. Now, this is the little lightning effect that I had. And if we just sort of step through this, you can see this is the effect here. And this was done using X particles. And it's a very simple setup. So we'll just load this scene into Cinema 4D. And here we have it. Now, it's not exactly the same one, but that's fine for demonstration purposes. You can see what we have is a cube kind of being drawn into the surface, and I want to create an effect of maybe the lightning pulling it in, So we're going to do that with X particles. Now, X particles is supported in R21, which is fantastic, and we can just easily make an emitter. What we need to do is change the shape to be an object mode, and this effect works by taking two emitters, kind of matching up the points, and then one of the generators in X particles is going to create those lightning effects. So I'm going to add, let's just make this one, we'll name it to be a little bit more organized, and I'm going to drag in the top plane into the object field here. So what that is a simple plane that I have as part of this hierarchy with the cube. So it will move exactly with the cube. And if I come out of my camera here, you can see there it is, just on the bottom, hidden there. So for that, I need to just set this up a little bit more. I'm going to make sure that the particles stick onto the source object, and I could even just turn off the speed as well, if needs be. And what I like to do with this is just animate the actual emission, because at the moment, and you won't be able to see it because I've turned off the speed and all that, but at the moment we're going to get thousands of particles being emitted. So what I'd like to do is just animate the birth rate. I'm going to start with nothing, and maybe we'll just start around here. So I can create a keyframe quite easily, and then bring this up to, let's see, around about here. I'm going to just increase that to just a very small amount, because I don't really need a crazy amount of lightning to make this effect look the way I want it. And then remove the birth rate. Now from there, it's so simple. All I need to do is just duplicate this. So I can Command or Control, click and drag to create a copy. I can then just rename this so that I know that I'm working on the bottom plane, which is just a little one here that's on the ground. And I'll just drag in the object into that field. So now we have, for the most part, the X particles setup complete. All we need to do is come in and add the XP electric generator. For some reason, there we go. There we are. Now we have it. Now to set this up, I just need to change it from particle to particle, because I want those particles to kind of like talk to each other. So I will add the bottom emitter at the top. So our destination is going to be, the actual emitter is going to be the bottom one, and the top one is going to be our destination emitter. And then it's a case of just dialing in the fork settings to get the look and feel that I'd like. Now you can see, or maybe it might be a little bit difficult to see, so to make that a bit easier for you, I'm going to just change the display color to on. So now we can see this lightning effect happen. And I haven't really dialed in those settings, but you can get an impression of what's going on here. So it's almost like it's pulling it in. And if I show you my end file, that's the kind of look and feel that I was going for. And again, just a little bit of tweaking on those fork settings, just to manage the number of divisions on the forks and things like that. To render it, again, using a hair render effect, So we get to a point where we can see the lightning, and just adding that hair material onto the XP electric generator allows me to now render that out from Cinema 4D. So just to show you once again, that was the kind of final look that I went for. And because this is all parented, so if I actually wanted to, I could take the cube and sort of drag it over. And now it's probably not going to work because of my animation settings, but let me just set a keyframe. Let's just see. So there you can see now the lightning will pull onto that cube that way. So a very flexible setup. There we go. All right. Next thing I'd like to talk about is this cube reveal. And we've got a couple of things happening here. The cube's being revealed by basically what we've got is a few cubes within each other, and one's being revealed by using fields, and another one is using deformers. So we'll start off with the fields, and what we can do with this is bring it into the MoGraph world by using a polyFX. Now this is a deformer, and you can have it as a child object, and it will still work. But another way of working with this is to have it on the same level of hierarchy, and to make sure that it's on the same level, we have to group it with a null. So now that's all readable as the same thing. So we'll leave it like we have, and to do the effect that I'd like to show you, I'm just going to add a plane effector. And now that works because I already have the polyFX object selected, so it adds the plane effector into the effectors list here. I can just turn off position, turn on scale, and I want to make this an absolute 0 scale. So it's completely hidden now from view. To bring that back, I'm going to add a linear field, and immediately you'll see how it's being revealed. So this is looking at what the top performer is doing, and then at the other segments of the cube, and revealing it in this way. Now I can come in and animate this. I can change the direction, like so, and bring this in. Now we could make this a bit more interesting by using other fields. So I will drag, what I'm going to do is come into my field fall-off list and add maybe a spherical field, maybe increase the radius. Okay, but that isn't going to do anything, as maybe not the effect that I want, because it's not moving with the linear field, which is my intention to animate. Very simple fix. All we need to do is make it a child of the linear field, and you can see, if we animate the linear field, it's going to come along for the ride. So from there I can offset this, and all I need to do is just focus on the linear field and maybe art direct the look and feel with the spherical field. So there's other ways of adding more detail and complexity, of course, just using another field. We could add a random field. It's going to randomize everything, change the blending mode to maybe overlay, and that's going to give us something else. So these fields work in a way very similar to if you've made an image composite in Photoshop or After Effects, just by blending these effects together, and you can dial them in with the opacity slider and just get exactly what you'd like. So let's take a look at how I ended up on that. And so for me, I think, don't actually have any animation on this, but you can get the idea that once I had it in a way that I wanted, I could just pick a point, and then this would just be animated through to remove, in this case, the effect. But of course, you can see we could bring it back on as well, in it just reversing the animation. Now the other thing, if we come back to this, is that peeling effect. Now that was achieved with a bend deformer. Now for this, we need more segments on the geometry. At the moment, we only have 2 by 2 by 2. And so to actually create a bend effect, we need to smooth this out. So otherwise, it just wouldn't work. So I can add more segments here. Maybe 20 would be good. And I could do this procedurally or after the fact, just subdividing the cube. Now, the key to this setup is to just separate the surfaces, and there's just a little checkbox at the bottom there. What that's going to do when I make this editable is, instead of it being a cube as we see it now, it's going to just take each face and separate them out. So I press C on the keyboard to make it editable. And now you can see I have all these different faces. So we'll focus on the first one, which is just over here. And to make the effect, I'm going to come over to the deformers. Loads of really useful things here, and you can find out there's a whole series on Cineversity which goes over every single one of these. Very useful. We're going to focus on the bend deformer right now, and I'm going to add this in. Now, because I pressed Shift on the keyboard when I created my bend deformer, it's already set up as a child of the face. It's also set it up in a way that should work, we think, but we're going to have to do a little bit of manipulating. Now, I'm adjusting the strength just to kind of get a sense of where it's going. And I can also constrain it so that the cube face doesn't extend beyond the length by just keeping this y-axis length. What I need to do is just rotate it. So I'm going to rotate this round, and it's bending inwards at the moment, but if I hold down Shift, I can constrain that and get it at around about 90 degrees. Of course, you can come in and dial in the value by using Coordinates Manager. Now this is just simply bending this way. Now, that's fine. I can make it a little bit more interesting just by rotating it round, or this way. And now I can just peel it off from the corner or something like that. So we can certainly art direct the look of this just by adjusting the rotation of the bend, and going beyond a certain threshold it will make it curl around on itself. So you can, that could be what you want, but you can also animate it so that you get the effect of it sort of being completely removed, which is what I ended up doing. So the final look of this, as we can see here, and this is exactly what my point was earlier about creating previews, is because we've got so much geometry happening in the viewport, it's struggling to kind of keep up in this case. But, and it looks like, I haven't even got the top performer turned on here in terms of the extrusions, but creating previews is essential in this case. But just by nesting these cubes, taking very simple ideas and combining them, you can create something a lot more complex. So that leads me nicely into the UI reveal, which is taking that same idea of a couple of different segments that, when combined, can create a more complex and visually interesting effect. So we're going to focus on how the lines were created right here, and also how this this other part of the geometry was revealed as well. And to do that, I'm going to open up this first splines thing. Now this is, as I recall, this is actually the output from what I'm going to show you. So we have a setup, very simple. I'm just going to do it on the fly right now. We have let's just imagine that this is the user interface, and we can bring in X particles. We'll add an emitter, and what I want to do is just size this down. I can just manipulate the handles in the viewport to do that, and to get it where I'd like, just use the orthographic views. So I can just position this maybe in the top left corner. So if I'm accurate enough, maybe I've got it there. I can just zoom in here and just be sure. So it looks like I want to just reduce the size of this a little bit. So I've got this tiny little emitter here, and currently, if I press play, it might be a bit difficult to see. We could change the display, but what I do is actually turn the cube to X-ray mode. And now you can see we've got a stream of particles. It's not doing exactly what I want, but okay, we're getting there. I want these to collide with the cube, do all kinds of crazy stuff, bounce around. So to do that, I can just add an XParticles collider tag. And I want to make sure that we're focusing on the inside so that nothing escapes. And then in the modifiers, I'm looking for one of the motion modifiers here. It's the XP network. Now I can change the plane so that it doesn't go too crazy. I want to control this a little bit to the YZ plane. So that means it's not going to escape in the X direction. It's not going to come towards us. So now you can start to see, yeah, we're getting something. Okay. I want to now change the angle of this so I can adjust the pitch. And this is giving me something, yeah, we're getting closer. To get the actual splines, I can just use a tracer or trails. So it's one of the generators that we have. And for me, to actually apply this easily, I always select the emitter and then add the XP trail, because that will set it up with the emitter in the field. I don't have to do that step manually. I can then just drag it into my system and keep it nicely organized. If I rewind and play, you're going to start to see those lines appear. Now this is way too much, and it's going to create something pretty heavy. So I can come over and change the emission. Maybe I want to really reduce the birth rate down. So something a bit more manageable. And to actually generate the splines, all we need to do, once we give ourselves maybe enough frames in the timeline to let this play out, let's just double click that. So we can see, yeah, we get something pretty interesting. I can press C on the trail to make it editable. You can also come over to here and make it editable that way. Now from there, I have this spline object. And I'll hide the cube, which I can manipulate further. So this is where we ended up, and for this example, it looks like it's a complete mess. If it's too heavy, no problem. You can just come in and select some points and press UW, and that will select all the points that are connected to that. So we can kind of say, all right, I don't need those anymore. Delete, UW, and delete. And so to save you the process of me just going through and cleaning that up, I'm going to just show you what it looks like when it's more reduced. It's the same, that's all I've done. It's just gone through and reduced this down. From there, we use the old friend MoSpline again, just to bring this into that system. So just like before with the logo, using a very similar technique, we can change the mode to spline. That gives you this new tab. You bring in the XP trail into the spline tab, and from there it's simply about animating the start and end or the offset. So by doing so, we can reveal, and also the key for this is to make the mode separate segments instead of the complete spline. That allows me to you can see all those different things being revealed in that way. So by doing that, and then maybe you could even do a different simulation with XParticles, create a different stream and layer them in a different way. We can offset another version of the MoSpline with a different material to kind of create maybe that highlighting effect. With the hair render, as we have on here, we can now output that as something that can be either composited as a separate pass or brought in to another scene file and combined in that way. So if we come back here, you can see that's the effect that I got from using XParticles to create those splines. And the next thing is the reveal of this. So this was done with vertex maps. Now, the great thing about, and it was introduced in R20 with the fields, is that you can actually use them with use a fields control vertex maps. So we can create these nice growing effects. To actually have a vertex map on this geometry, it needs to be a polygonal object so it can see these points and polygons, which we have here. And to easily create a vertex map, I can just use my paint tool, hold down shift and just click onto the geometry. Now currently the weight is set to nothing, so it's not going to do anything. This little checkbox here allows me to use fields to control how this is going to work. So I can change, currently the state is frozen, so it's not going to do a single thing until I give it something to do. And I want to change the mode to grow. Now until I give it something to actually affect the weight of the vertex map, as I'm doing now with the spherical field, it's not going to do anything. So just by doing this now, and it's in grow mode, we can start to actually grow that out. Now you can see that the values that I have in this freeze layer are too low. I need to increase the radius, and that will give me, hopefully, an effect where it will grow over time. So I can then position the spherical field right in the corner or wherever, and I can animate this on and off and have that just grow out. Now to make the leading edge a bit more interesting, we can just randomize how it looks. So add a random field, setting the mode to overlay, and if we just rewind, we'll let it catch up with us. Now we're getting a bit more of an interesting effect. How does this work to reveal the object? Currently we've got a material on here, and the material has an alpha channel. So we can just add a vertex map effect in the alpha channel and just drag this in. Now you've seen the viewport change. So the bits where we have color is obviously what we can see. If we just render the view, now we can easily create this effect. And of course, combined with the other one, with the splines, we're going to get something pretty visually pleasing, certainly to my eye. Now here's the end result of that. I can take that same setup, I can take what I've done with my vertex maps, and if I bring this into the MoGraph world with a poly effects, I can then, in the effectors tab, my apologies, I've got a plane effector, and this, the parameters that we've got set up on this is to adjust the position, scale and rotation, so we can do all kinds of things, manipulating the geometry in this way. And in the fall off tab of the plane effector, I'm now using that vertex map to drive this whole effect, and I can dial it in with other modifier layers as needed. So from just revealing a material, we can actually reveal geometry as well. So there we have it. Now there's a couple of ways of using this setup. So you can see it, the geometry is now being built on. If I just zoom in a little bit, you can now see those lines happening. So we've got the same setup on the outer glass and then also on the UI, and if we, as I said before, you can use maybe a curve just to kind of adjust the data and how it actually animates in. So we have the effect of this reveal. We have also a little rippling effect. Again, a combination of a few elements. Now this was just by creating well, I've got a simple cube here, cloning it and turning the mode to grid array. And if I just adjust this, just get this set up, maybe just reduce the number of steps. And yeah, so we have a nice grid of of cubes. And to get the ripple, all I'm doing is modifying the cloner with a plane effector, simply on the Y height. And currently that's moving every single clone in that position. So we want to restrict that and I'm using just a torus field. And this is quite nice because it's adding some color data for us, so it should be easy to visualize. All we need to do is just adjust the radius and animate that. So if I just set a keyframe, I can go beyond the slider just by maybe typing in a value. Let's go 500 for now. And we have this kind of ripple effect. Now if we combine that with something else and a camera move, we end up with something looking way more complex. And the other part of this is just taking a spline, well, a couple of circles. Let's just bring this into its own scene. What I love about cinema as well is if I want to work on on an element in isolation, I can just simply copy and paste it into a new scene, and it just allows me to focus on that single element, and then I can bring it back into my main scene as well. So what we have in this scene is just a couple of circles, and they're just animating in. So all I'm doing is just taking the radius value of each one and just animating them. And in isolation, yeah, that's fine. But once you bring it into MoGraph and start to clone it and make something a bit more interesting, you get this kind of sort of ripple and radio wave type thing, and that's all being controlled with a step effector, and we're just adjusting the time offset of the animation that was actually on the curves on the circles. So just offsetting that in that way, duplicating them, we can create complexity from something very, very simple. Now, of course, you bring that back in to the main scene, and combined with that a very simple ripple effect that we had on the cubes, and a slightly jaunty camera angle, then we can create this final look and feel. I'd also like to talk about another setup where I was just using Python to control the what I call it the doors, but the on the eye as we zoom into it of this scene. I wanted to have something that just opened up, and instead of, if you think about it, that's quite a few pieces of geometry. I just wanted to have control with just a single slider. And so to set that up, what I've got here is I've used MoGraph because this text was created with MoText, another MoGraph object. I used a MoGraph selection just to single out the eye, and I've hidden it from this main text, and then just made that object editable, so I could just focus on the eye here. So currently we're going to crash into that, and it would be nice if we could open it up. So to do so, all I did was take the cap, which is the top part here, and with a couple of segments, and I've just adjusted it so that my axis on each one is at the very edges. And you can do that very simply. If we press Shift C, we can actually bring up the commander, type in axis center, and this gives us a really handy tool which allows us to manipulate the axis. And what I've done here, if I just maybe execute that, let's just see, maybe it's in the right place. Let's try this one. You can see how I'm switching that over. So for me, I need to get this back. I can just put it over that way. That allows me to take the scale on the y-axis at least, and just shrink it down. And that's what I want to do. And I can control that with Python instead of having a few more keyframes. So I've set this up in a way that I've added some user data, which is a way of just adding fields and things like that we can control rigging. So I've set that up on this object so that we have just some linked lists that allow me to drop in an object and then a simple slider to control the animation. And another great feature about R21 now is I can actually save and load these as presets. So if I wanted to build up a more complex thing or take small ideas and components that I'm reusing all the time, yeah, I can just save out a little thing and then start to build up something more complex just by loading in these presets. So it's very handy and a great new feature. Now for this, we've got a Python tag. So all we need to do with this is get our user data from the Python tag into this script, and it's just a case of just dragging and dropping. Now, of course, I need to set up a variable so I can just sort of use it later. So if I say this is my first door, and instead of it saying Python, we just need to change that to OP because this is what it is operating on. And door, let's make this door 2. I'm going to drag and drop. And of course, we need to make this equal to that. And then I'll drag in the slider. Let's create a variable for it. Okay, so we've got that in, and of course do the little renaming. Alright, and then now we just say, alright, slider, do something to these doors. So I can drag in the thing I'd like to affect, which is this, and make it the value of the slider. Yep. And so by doing that, I can build it up. And once we've done that, a more complete look of this, if I just enable this tag, because I think I have it disabled, there we go. I can show you, I can see now I've got this one slider here that I can control the animation of these doors. So if I just adjust that for you now in the viewport, for me that was makes it quite simple to do. Now I can then take that same idea and split out the geometry at the back and just copy the tag onto it, and all it's going to be looking for with the user data is just some new objects to affect. So just simply dragging and dropping, we can create a little animation rig for this. So there's other ways of doing this, of course. It just keeps the number of keyframes and the number of objects that you're actually animating in a scene pretty low. I'd like to finally show you again the animation that was created. Thank you. And so we have, if you'd like to see it in situ, there's Meta actually here at IBC on the Amazon stand. So, yep, finally I'd just like to just mention a couple of R21 features because it's such a fantastic release. We should definitely talk about it. So there's a couple of cool objects that we have, but I think because I might be running low on time, I'll just show you a little bit about the denoiser. And I've been working with Grayscale Gorilla recently to create some training. One of the things that I'm teaching there is, of course, using field forces, and this whole setup was created using field force, which is new to R21, and kind of allows you to. It kind of takes these are particles and thinking particles that were not really part of my workflow, because I do tend to use X particles actually, but it kind of brings those back into your mind, and it allows you to take almost make your own custom forces. So you could simply combine a field force with a spherical field to maybe make an attractor, something like that. And what I'm using in this example is a combination of this field force with thinking particles to actually create and obviously the MoGraph system to generate particles on geometry and then have them affect and flow around the geometry. And it's something that you can do with the built-in tools, which is obviously a plus. So for this, to actually get a preview out and to kind of think how is this even going to look, I used the denoiser just to get the preview, and that's a simple effect that we can add on here. You'd come over to effects and just add it. I've turned the physical render settings down to absolutely nothing, so we'll give this a real good test. Now, for that, I would expect loads and loads of grain, and it would just look absolutely terrible and be completely unusable. But for a preview, let's just see how we get on. So if I press, let's just not render to the picture view, we'll render to the viewport. And it's going to have a little look at that. And if we look at here, this is, all the aliasing, it's pretty nasty. And for the moment, pretty unusable, but it does clean up just like that. So there's certain cases where this is absolutely usable, and you can get your previews out very quickly. And let me just show you the preview render. A very tiny resolution as well, but let's just play it massively. And so we have, it's perfectly, I'd say, acceptable for preview purposes, apart from the last shot, where it just can't handle it, because it's seeing everything and just trying to just compress everything down. So yeah, you've got to pump up the settings, of course, and that's the thing. You can just adjust the settings as needed, probably still keep on the denoiser and get something completely usable. The final result for this is how, and this whole tutorial walks you through that field force process. It was fun to do, and it's been great to be part of GSU Plus. I also create a lot of training for LinkedIn Learning. I've got over 20 courses on the library at the moment. I've got another one coming out very soon about R21, and I'd invite you to check those out. Finally, I'd like to talk about the X Particles Challenge. It's a community competition, something that is I'm quite passionate about. The results that people submit, it just amazes me and blows me away what people can do with both X Particles and Cinema 4D. And so I'm looking forward to doing that again this year. So I'd like to just end on the show reel and give a big thanks to Niels Preyer for providing the audio for that. And here we have it. All right. Thank you very much to the sponsors that provide the amazing prizes for this competition, and for everyone that continues to enter, and like I said, blown away by all the results. So thank you so much for being with me here, and thank you to everyone watching online, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to Maxon for having me, and enjoy the rest of the show. So thank you.